I'll be honest with you, when I realized how big trauma was, how big not going to therapy was and working through some of my history, my past, I didn't realize how much I was my worst enemy. I was the one keeping myself from completing. It wasn't my scatterbrain or excitement or shiny ball syndrome. That played a part in some cases. But really, it was me looking at the mirror every day and underestimating the power of my trauma. Because trauma mutates your brilliance.
All right, so another episode of Just Stream. Today I have Tina Bonner.
Yes, sir.
Speaker, entrepreneur, coach,
Yeah.
DJ.
Come on. You got to give all the accolades. Absolutely.
She does a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
Tina, just tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so, well, first of all, thank you so much for doing this for me. We need your energy, good love, good vibes, and I appreciate you for just bringing me on your platform. For me, you know, what I do is I do anything that makes me come alive. And so when it comes to what I do, those are just the avenues, I like to call it, in which way I express my gift, my creativity, my light, my passion, my love. And so a lot of people here like, man, you're a DJ and then you're also an entrepreneur and then you're also like a coach and a speaker. Like, how you do all of it?
Right.
And so the reality is for me is it's not necessarily how do we do all of it more than how do we just die empty. That's my thing, right? Like, how do we die empty?
Wait, what you mean by die empty? What's that mean?
So we come into this world with gifts. I call it passions. Some people call it, you know, talents, abilities, but they're natural. They're innate. They have been given to us, as I say, by the divine. And so when we come into this world, we also come into it not just with the gifts and the talents that we possess, but we come into it with assignments, things that we're supposed to do with those gifts, talents, abilities. And so when I say die empty, it's this concept of not just leveraging all that we've been given innately, but also executing all that we've been called and assigned to do by the divine before our time here is expired.
Come on.
You feel me?
That's
so
good.
Dying empty is all the assignments are complete, all the contracts are complete, right? And all the missions are complete so that we can do it in a way that fulfills the creator.
All right, so Tina, you told me that you have embarked on a new mission, performance coaching.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about what that even means.
Performance coaching. So what does it mean to be a performance coach, right? Let me give you the backstory, why I even got here, because I think that's important to know. Because I can tell you what I do, but knowing why I do it is super important. And so, honestly, I've always been a hustler, been a creator, been somebody, like, I was the kid back in the day that was, like, selling candy to other kids in middle school. Like, that was me, right? Like, we would go to the hair salon with my mom, and back in the day, I don't even know if they do that nowadays, kids, but we go to the hair salon, and I have a briefcase full of candy, books.
A briefcase?
A briefcase. When the last time you seen a briefcase? A briefcase full of everything I can find. It was like when you come in, you got the coat, and you like, what you want? It was like that, right? And I say that because I've always been an entrepreneur mind. But as I got older and keep grinding and keep hustling, around 2012, something called Instagram came out. And when that came out, what happened was there began, casually people started posting pictures and content. Fast forward though, around 2017, it started to become a thing that you use for your business. And that's what introduced this spirit of competition. And so now you don't just have people posting pictures, it's everybody posting their lifestyle and all of these things. That fueled hustlers a lot more because you feel like there's this sense of comparison that has to happen. It's interesting because I didn't understand, I identified that until later. And so around that time frame, about 2017, I remember just hustling really, really hard because there's this halo that you feel like that you're trying to get, but really it's everybody just flexing. And so during that time, my hustle began to go in overdrive. Right, my hustle was in overdrive. The problem was my body didn't catch up. And so I found myself working late nights, grinding, getting to the bag, as we say, right? But what happened was in 2018, I found myself in the ER. And I asked the doctor, you know, we went through 5 different tests. I've been there for like 10 hours, Will, and they're like, no, honestly, Ms. Bonner, we can't find anything that's wrong with you. Like, your tests look good. But he said, well, the reason why you came in here was because you were like 6 points away from having a stroke, your blood pressure.
Wow.
Mind you, I'm like in my 20s at the time, Will.
Yeah.
This is like crazy. And he said, the only thing that can be causing this much stress in your body to the point where you would have a stroke is that you're just overworking. You're so working consciously, unconsciously, physically, you're burning your body out that you are like points away from a stroke. And my mom was in the hospital with me that day, and she just had tears and welts in her eyes because she imagined that, you know, if we hadn't come to the hospital that day, just because I had some pain in my arm, she may have been burying her daughter the next day. And so that was the changing moment for me. I said, this hustle means nothing if I have nothing to show for it.
Right.
This hustle means nothing. And so that embarked me on a journey to say, how can I find the balance of being a high performer? Because I'm going to do what I do. We a doer. You feel me? Like, that's what you just said earlier. I'm going to work hard, but how can I do it in a way that's well? How can I do it in a way that allows me to incubate my gifts so I don't burn out? And I stumbled across performance coaching. And I was so inspired that I became a coach myself.
So you took performance coaching first.
I had a coach first.
Okay.
And then I was so inspired by my ability to do more in one day than I did in 5 days of working.
What?
That I said I have to learn this information to be able to teach it to our tribe, our people, our culture, because we're gifted, we're brilliant, but we burned out.
Right.
So that's what performance coaching is. It's the ability to take your gifts and your talents and continue to perform at a high level without burnout, without stress, and in fact, doubling your results.
So it's like improving your efficiency.
Yeah, all across the board.
So Tina, how does performance coaching work? Like, what exactly do you do?
Yeah. So performance coaching is so powerful because what it really does is reverse engineer what we already have. So we have a brain, we have a body, right? All humans come out the box for the most part the same way. And so biologically, the basis of what I teach is hacking the science of your body and your brain. And then the motivation and all that stuff that we try to teach, that's just by default. That happens as a byproduct of understanding your brain and understanding how to leverage your body. So for example, when we think about motivation and the science of motivation, right, there's actually things that we can do practically to increase motivation without just listening to some hype music. There's things that we can do practically from a science perspective, from a biological perspective, to increase our motivation and even eliminate procrastination. And these are the things that we you need that treatment plan, right? That one. But my point is that when we understand performance coaching, we realize that it's not about, you know, figuring out how to always work, you know, faster. Those are great things. It's really figuring out, as you said, how to work more efficiently, right? How to leverage. I teach my clients all the time this concept of like, how do we leverage time? Time management? That's so like 2010 to me. Like, how do we leverage time? And so it's just taking these concepts that we already have equipped with and being able to turn it on its head, upside down, and see them, as you say, from a different perspective so that we can use them to our advantage. God made us beautifully, masterfully. And to be honest, we're only using like 2%.
2%?
Yeah, for sure.
Damn.
Yeah.
So talking to you is always a pleasure because you, like you said, you're a hustler, you're a doer, you're a go-getter. Me, naturally, I don't think I had that naturally.
Okay.
I was always like an observer. That's how I became a videographer. I like to watch stuff play out.
Okay.
So you always give me like that fire, like, nah, go do it.
Yeah.
But like, how did you know that when did you first realize that was you? Like, how did you get that hunger?
So I think you make a good point, Will, right? Because everybody is not designed the same. We are all designed masterfully and beautifully, but we're not always the same. And different doesn't mean that we're better or worse. It just means different. And so for me, you know, I really came out the box that way. If I could be honest, like, you got to remember my story. I came 2.5 months early, and I was fighting for my life.
Wow.
At 2.5 months. It's in my DNA to fight, right? Like, that's just who I am, and that's my story, right? But everyone's story is different. So I think when it comes to being a doer, we got to give ourselves some credit to really, or should I say, yes, give credit, but we got to give ourselves some time to look back at our script. The history informs the future. The history informs the future from from a genesis perspective. If we can go back and look at the genesis of who we are as a child and as a kid, we can find a lot of the breadcrumbs, right, that we can lean into now. So becoming a doer for me, I was always a doer. Now a finisher, that's another conversation.
Okay.
But I was always a doer, always a hustler, always grinding, but I had to learn how to finish.
So what did that look like?
So the difference between being a doer and an executor and a finisher and a champion really is a matter of time and patience, right? Because you can start something, but if you don't have the patience, you don't have the discipline, you don't have the grit, right? Sometimes it's even the community to incubate your hustle. You'll find that you are doing a lot of things, but not completing a lot of things.
Okay.
And so where that came from was really first understanding what are the impediments that stop me from finishing. And I'll be honest with you, when I realized how big trauma was, how big not going to therapy was and working through some of my history, my past, I didn't realize how much I was my worst enemy. I was the one keeping myself from completing. It wasn't my scatterbrain or excitement or shiny ball syndrome. That played a part in some cases, but really it was me looking at the mirror every day and underestimating the power of my trauma, because trauma mutates your brilliance. Trauma mutates your brilliance, and when we don't understand that, we think that we are walking in our power and walking in our gift, and it's really mutated. It's not until we undo that and heal from it that we can find that we can walk in our full power. And so that was my story. Once I figured out my trauma and I could identify those places, I worked on those things and I healed those things and got help to do that. I found that, man, completion is easy because I can see my purpose clearer, right? I can see my people clearer that I'm supposed to serve. And really it just became a matter of executing and finishing. So
on this show, I always ask a bunch of questions.
Yeah.
You can let me know if I ever ask too many.
Okay.
I'm curious if we could go a level down, like was there a specific trauma that caused that blockage of finishing?
Yes. So he's trying to unpack my story. Where the tissue at?
People might need to
feel
it, to resonate.
I'm with it.
You know.
So the one big story comes to mind is that I grew up very privileged. I just say it right out the gate. I grew up very privileged as a child. My parents laid a very strong foundation for their careers, and I was blessed enough to reap that.
Right.
So from the age of 1 to all the way to 17, dream life, right? I literally drove a 745 BMW to school, right? Like in high school. So I say that just to set the stage of how big my fall was. So that was the life that I was living from 1 to 17. When I got 17, my parents were going through some things behind the scenes that I had no idea about. And as a result, I would find out that senior year, that year of prom, mind you, I'm coming from like money. I'm coming from people like taking care of everything.
Right.
We get ready to go to the store to get my prom dress for the day. And my mom says, I'm just going to let you know now that we may not be able to get the dress you want. And so I kind of like brush it off. I'm like, whatever she's talking about, whatever. Like, we're good. We get to the store. I found this dream dress. It's beautiful. It's green. It's like, green was my favorite color. It was just like, oh my gosh, that's the one. It's like when you walk into something, you don't have to look at nothing else. It was like that. It was like that one, right? Get the dress. And the lady's like, well, you got to come back in. This is just the actual display. So I said, okay, well, this is the one I want. We get home, sit at the dinner table, and it's just me and my mom at the time. And she said, hey, I want to let you know we can't afford that dress. And I'm looking at her like, what are you talking about? Like, mind you, 17 years of being able to afford everything. What are you talking about, Mom? Like, what's up? And come to find out that would be in the beginning of what our family empire was as a decline. That would begin the decline. And I never forget how much that shattered me, because that was just the first moment. It began to be moment after moment after moment where I had these expectations for myself and expectations for my worth, right? And my worth began to be tied to these things. Okay. And so early on, prior to even starting as a DJ, going to college, all of these things, I felt like what I did was tied to who I am and my worth. Okay. And it was tough, man. It was tough because I didn't know how to live life any more than a privileged child.
So it's like you had to find a whole new identity.
Bingo.
Okay.
You got it. The identity I knew was taken from me, and nobody else told me which one to pick up.
That's tough.
So now what? So I'm like aimlessly walking around with just I don't know what to do. I have nowhere to place myself.
Okay.
And, yeah.
So how'd you end up finding like who Tina really was?
Everything we just talked about. It took me another 10 years to go and feel around, which led to burnout and a whole lot of other things, because I tried to create identities for me based on what I saw.
Okay.
And not based on who I actually was. So I looked externally to find the identity. And that's great if you want to be inspired.
Right.
But there's a difference between being inspired and then actually identifying with someone and taking on their identity.
That makes sense.
I was doing the latter.
I think a lot of people do, especially like you said in this Instagram age where you see what everybody's doing.
Man.
And it's so easy to just latch on like, oh, that looks cool. I don't feel like my life looks that cool. Let me do that. And you just hop around and.
Man, it's a dangerous place to be where you're so vulnerable and you have no direction or mentors or people speaking into your life, giving you direction. Even if it's spiritually getting direction, that you just latch on to anything. That's a dangerous place to be.
Yeah.
And I was in that place. And so that became the seedbed of more trauma, because I would put my hands on more identities, more things that weren't mine, that weren't assigned to me, and then create another layer of trauma, because I wasn't even supposed to be there in the first place.
And it's like when it's not assigned to you, it normally gets taken away. And then that's that more trauma you're talking about, that loss.
So let me circle back around to you.
Okay.
Yes, that is exactly what happened and created the issue of completion, because I began to attach myself to identities, experiences, and things because I was just in search for some solitude under my feet.
Right.
That the disappointment of it, when it didn't pan out because it wasn't assigned to me, created the expectation for disappointment. So guess what happens when somebody has an expectation for disappointment? They stop early before they begin to get disappointed.
Whew. Let's pause right there, because I've never heard that said out loud, but that makes so much sense.
You feel me?
So much. Even so, I can see that in relationships
Yep.
too, like in any aspect of life where things just, it's like a cycle of just things not happening.
Yep.
I can see how that could be the root of it.
That's so back to the neuroscience, man. That's why I love neuroscience, because if we take this another layer deep and pull back the skin, literally, we'll find the biological pieces that are happening. So in the book, The Body Keeps Score, absolutely recommend that for anybody who's interested in any of this neuro talk, right? Or body talk. But in the book, The Body Keeps Score, it talks about how inside of our bodies gets trapped the experience from a biological perspective. So not only are we experiencing disappointment after disappointment after disappointment, and if anybody's ever felt like you resonate with that, like, man, that's been my life too. Whether it's been in relationships, business, career, family, when you experience so much disappointment back to back to back, right, or just consecutively, we then teach our brain to connect and wire itself to remember disappointment. We're teaching ourselves that disappointment is our story from a biological perspective. So now we wonder why we are having a traumatic response in the middle of a relationship that we actually know that's for us is biologically encoded, because that's what we keep experiencing. That's where it takes having something like Affirm to undo the trauma. That's where therapy comes in, to undo the trauma. That's where neuroplasticity, I'm trying not to go deep on y'all.
Go deep.
Right? But that's where neuroplasticity things come in, as far as activities, which is essentially rewriting the brain's wiring. That's where that comes in, to break that pattern of disappointment. So some of us feel like we have a completion problem. We really have a neural wiring issue that we have not yet severed and rewired.
So how do you rewire your mind?
See, that's a whole nother masterclass. The short footnotes: how do you rewire your mind? You interrupt the pattern. We have to interrupt the pattern, and some of us are so complacent, and that was my story. We're either blinded, complacent, in terms of just not wanting to step out of our comfort zone, or we're just ignorant, and that's where great conversations like this come in, right? So you just don't know. You don't know what you don't know.
Right.
Or you're blinded by your talent. Ooh, that's the good one. I love that one. I love telling clients, like, really what's happening is that you're blinded by your giftedness. You're good, but you could be great if you just go ahead and work through some of this trauma and let's rewire your brain.
Stop attacking me, man.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, not sorry. It's needed though, man. So yeah, that's how we rewire. We got to interrupt the pattern, and then we have to rewrite something new. And that's where those affirmations, that's where those visualization practices come in. That's where having someone to guide you through experience. So I love people hiring coaches because they can guide you through these experiences. That's where that comes in. So you got to break the pattern. First, identify it.
Right.
Identify the fact that, like, I keep abandoning these relationships that I know are for me. Identify, be real with yourself. I keep dropping the ball on these businesses that I know are really great. Identify the pattern, break it, meaning just interrupt it, and then rewire it. Fill in the blank with something new.
That's good.
Yeah.
So for people like myself who struggle with the ego at times,
Okay.
Coaches, I know the value of coaches, but I always had a block because I'm like, I don't need nobody to tell me how to be me. And that's, I think a lot of people probably would be ashamed to admit that that's the reason why they don't seek out help. What would you say to somebody like that?
The perspective I would say for someone who has been on the fence, always about hiring a coach, a mentor, is that you're not hiring a coach to tell you how to be you. You're hiring a coach to remind you who you already are. Sometimes we forget.
Okay.
Sometimes there are moments where you're going to wake up and forget that you are actually worth it. Sometimes there are moments where you're going to wake up and you're going to forget that you can actually interrupt the pattern. Sometimes there are going to be days where we know that we are this close and we forgot a particular strategy, or we're stuck, whether that be creatively stuck, whether that be writer's block, whether that be performance block, where you're just in a rut of motivation. Coaches that are really good don't tell you what to do. I never tell my clients what to do. I remind them of their power, and then I either equip them with a new strategy that they can consider, and or I just help them go back through the story to find a strategy that already worked for them in the past.
Okay.
So it's a guide. A coach is meant to guide you on a journey, right? Like, nobody can tell LeBron how to be LeBron.
Right.
Nobody could tell Kobe how to be Kobe.
Right.
But with Phil Jackson's help, Kobe was able to guide himself to the best version of himself.
Yeah, he can
And
win
that's what
some
coaches
rings
do.
with the
You feel
coach.
me?
I feel you.
I'm Phil Jackson.
Okay. Okay, Phil.
I'm Phil Jackson in this analogy. So yeah, man, coaches are great, and they're not for every season. That's the thing too. Like, coaches aren't for every season. I love having. I step in my coaches. Some are like seasonal. Some are just at the beginning of the year. But there's a book I love. It's called "Who's Holding Your Ladder."
Okay.
Who's Holding Your Ladder, and it talks about, like, if you are, depending on how high you want to climb, think about an actual ladder. If you're going 2 feet, just like a footstool, you don't need nobody to hold it.
Right.
But if your vision is big and your mission is big and you plan on going 100 feet in the air, imagine going 100 feet in the air and only one person holding your ladder.
Yeah, that's
You
not
feel
it.
me? And so that's what we have to look at and say, hey, if we have big vision and big goals and big aspirations for our life, our staffing of our life has to look like that too.
I never thought about it like that.
Yeah.
So something interesting.
What's up?
I know that you are a doer, you're a mover. A previous friend of, or not previous, a friend of mine, we had a conversation a while back about, she's the same way.
Okay.
No matter what, she's gonna be doing something.
Yeah.
But her thing, we realized, was like, she needed direction, because she's gonna go,
Okay.
but she didn't know where to go sometimes, and that would lead her places maybe she didn't want to be. So how did you find your direction to put your energy into? And by the way, this is Dutch's auntie. This
is my boo.
Yeah,
Hey, girl.
that's her auntie, yeah.
You said, how did I find what now?
How did you find the direction to put your hustle to? Because it seems like now you have chosen to put it into empowering other people.
Yeah.
How'd you get there?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. Because as we are spiritual and divine beings on a physical journey, it can be hard to distinguish between different realms, right? We're in a physical body that we are slaves essentially to our mind, our consciousness, the physical matter, but then when the divine piece comes in, it's like, sometimes how do you distinguish that? And so to preface it, it's challenging. Yeah. Sometimes it's challenging when you're trying to distinguish between, is this just something that my ego wants to feed, that I really kind of just want to do, or is this something that's divine and pulled in direction? And really, my take on this is that it comes with sharpening your ear. We talk about this in whoever, if you grow up in church, and if not, that's fine. But spiritually, we talk about the idea of tuning your ear. It's like a radio station, right? And like when you're trying to find the channel and you're in between, you get a little static. But right when you get right on that line and it's aligned, you can hear the station clearly. And so that comes with really, I believe, sitting with yourself. I say this quote a lot, and it's potency rises in silence. Okay. And that concept is like, potency is the idea to transform or move someone. And so when we understand that potency rises in silence, but also clarity rises in silence. Okay. And so how you get that direction, I don't have a 1-2 step plan, but I do know, just from historically speaking, that when you sit with yourself without the contamination of social media, without the contamination of opinions and people, right? You allow yourself to fine-tune that hearing because it's not contaminated by all the noise outside, and you can say, this is actually something that I feel deep in my spirit and my soul to be guided to. And this is something that I actually feel like is just being real with myself, something I just want to do for my accomplishments. Right. So I believe sitting with it so you can get clarity and then get the potency, which is the power to do the thing. And so how you get there, you just keep living. You keep living and you lean into the things that you're inspired by. So some people don't live. Some people just do. There still has to be a balance of living so that you can get inspired on the next thing to do.
So what do you mean by living?
So there's living and then there's being alive. We're being alive right now because our breath is coming through our body and our hearts are beating. Right. So we are by default being alive, but we're living because we're doing our gift and our talent and just thriving with each other, right? So living means doing things that make you feel like you are just invigorated, that make you feel inspired, that bring you joy and peace and happiness. That's living. Yeah. You going to Australia the other week to be like, I'm just going to go. That's living. Yeah. And so a lot of people are alive, but they're not living.
Right. But to get personal, between you and I, how did you find what living was? Or did you already inherently know that?
No, of course not. Of course I didn't know. Like, especially in the 20s, like, I didn't know. I'm just doing my thing. I'm just doing whatever I want to do. To your point, the direction wasn't there. It wasn't, I have to kind of go back and figure out what was that moment. But I think I remember getting ready to turn 30 and realizing that I had done a lot of things that are cool and super dope, and I've got a chance to be on stage with tens of thousands of people DJing, and all that stuff was great. But I believe when it comes to feeling invigorated and feeling purposeful, it takes a different level of intention. Yeah. And so if I can introduce that word to the chat, it would be intention. Okay. That was the difference, was getting ready to turn 30, and I'm like, let's reflect, because we get ready to go into a new decade of life. And during reflection, I realized, man, like, I've done a lot of things I can do, but I haven't done a lot of things that I'm called to do. And that's the difference for me. It was like, I could do anything. Right. I'm actually extremely gifted and brilliant.
You are.
And I feel like I can do anything I put my mind to. That's just my personal self-belief. But everything I'm not supposed to be doing, everything I'm not assigned to do. And that's where that intentionality comes in.
That resonates so heavy with me.
Yeah?
Because I just had my moment like a couple weeks ago where it's like, I've been doing a lot, but what has really felt aligned, not that much. I felt like since 2015, my life was just like, all right, I don't want a 9 to 5. Okay. So what can I do to get out of a 9 to 5? And that was cool. It was a step. But then it's like, okay, now that I'm out, what am I really supposed to be doing?
That part.
what is my purpose? And I feel like I've known it, but I've always run from it. I've always wanted to just stay in the safe space where, my bills are paid, I can have stable relationships and just have a regular life. The things, that America teaches you is the American dream.
Good old America, right.
Yeah. But then I just realized I wasn't fulfilled. No matter how many external accolades or validation, it just never did anything for me. And I realized the thing that made me feel most alive and most purposeful was sharing like this, like conversations that can enlighten, that can bring perspective. I can still use my talent of videography, but doing it in a way where I'm spreading a message that I care about, not necessarily promoting other people's messages or advertising for brands. This happened 2 weeks ago.
Come on.
You know what I mean?
I love this, man.
Yeah. So it was a lot. I left the relationship. It was a lot that happened like very quickly, but I feel so much lighter.
Wow.
I feel so much happier, so much more purposeful, so much more peaceful.
Yeah.
And I know it doesn't mean life's gonna get easier. If anything, life will probably get harder. But I don't mind working harder when I feel more purposeful. I look forward to it. You know what I mean?
I love it, man. You get me excited. Yes.
Yeah. So
yeah, congratulations, man, and just
appreciate it.
Blessings to you, because I believe your platform, one is people are going to be blessed by this and the conversations, but also, like you said, you feel lighter. Like I see you often, right? But you feel lighter, and what happens with that, you exude inspiration and energy that becomes contagious for the next person's story. So I'm excited for you, man.
Me too. And the thing is, you do that. Like when I met you, like you have that energy that's just like, when you leave, you're just like, damn, she was cool. Like, I don't know what it is about her, but she just has good energy.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to have you here to be able to share, some of your perspectives.
No, thank you for having me. And the crazy thing is, Will, what we're talking about, like, this is available to anybody. This is the energy that emits from someone when they are walking in purpose and calling. And I love how we also have two different energy patterns.
Yeah.
Because, me, I'm a former DJ. So I'm going to be loud, hype, crowd control. Like, that's just my thing. My octaves go up and down and all of that. But you also have this very cool, calm, and collected, but it's very sure. You're very sure, you're very solid, and I hope that people looking today just realize that, like, just because you are different or we have differences doesn't change our power. We're both extremely powerful, right? And so I only bring that up because I think nowadays there's this representation that you got to be, like, loud and extra and all of this other stuff and be doing the most on the gram to, like, have power, and really power comes in various packages. And so I see you, man. I see you, and I appreciate you for putting on for everybody in this space. So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Another question for
What's
you.
up?
So we talk about the divine a lot. We talk about purpose. We talk about growing up in church.
Yeah.
Where are you now with God, and what is your perspective on the divine and what that means?
Ooh. Where do I start? I say that because it's been a journey. It's been a journey. I'll put it this way. Growing up in church, my parents are pastors.
Oh,
and so
that's where you get it from.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was always like a fighter, came out the womb fighting, but the essence of who I am is definitely built from them. And but what I think is really interesting is that growing up, especially as an adolescent and even into teenage and adult years, growing up in church, I began to latch on to the perspective that I have to wait for God through Jesus to do something for me, for something to get done. And being a doer, that was very challenging for me because it meant that I was always on the sidelines waiting for God to accept my prayer or Jesus to accept the prayer through God, right? Or however it goes.
You got to go down his list of everybody and get to your prayer.
And what happened was, though, is that perspective, while that may have served others, right? That perspective for me made me feel that I had like almost these invisible shackles on my legs and feet and my hands because I had to wait for permission to do, right? I would ask for this thing or pray for this next breakthrough or pray for whatever, and church teaches us to pray for it and then sit. They teach us to like pray for that next house, or pray for your job, or pray for XYZ to happen, that you get a promotion, and it doesn't teach us to do the next part, which is faith with works. And so I began to get really, to be honest with you, I began to get really distasteful and unserved, I feel like, by Black culture and Black church culture, specifically Christianity. And so that led me on my own journey to be open to say, man, what is there something else in terms of a perspective? And it led me down to find fresh perspective, to realize that like I can still believe in God while not necessarily having to wait for something, if you will, to work through me in order to do it, right? Granted, I believe 1,000% that power, that's where the power comes from. But I have a new perspective now that, man, if there's something that moves on your heart, you don't have to just pray for it and wait. Like, I now ascribe to the perspective of like, yeah, absolutely tap into the divine. Absolutely invite the divine to guide you and lead you. But you can absolutely do the work too, right? In conjunction. And so that's been my big maybe shift perspective-wise. Okay. That has allowed me to be much more active, literally, in my faith. Right. So yeah.
I like that. So I agree. I feel like I have a similar story. Since I wasn't as much of a doer, that wasn't the deal breaker for me. But mine was more so just like I just couldn't make sense of a lot of the teachings. I'm a very logical person. Things have to click for me. And as I got older, a lot of things just was like not clicking. And it led me on my personal journey. But I think the beautiful part about it, and there's even a Bible verse that says this, it's like, when you ask, you shall receive. When you knock, the door shall be open. So it's like having the boldness to go on your journey and want to understand more and get an understanding where it resonates with you, where you can actually live it versus just talking about it. Like that boldness gets you where you need to be, and it often takes you away from what's taught in Black culture, church, and Christianity in general. But I think it's beautiful because more and more people are taking that step.
I agree.
It's scary though.
Yeah.
When you grow up in church.
What's the scariest part?
Cause like they tell you when you don't question God, like you don't want to go to hell. It's
right. Don't ask no questions.
I remember praying one night, like, God, you know my heart, but like don't send me to hell, but I just really got to do this. Like,
you know my heart.
Yeah. That night changed my life though. Yeah. I'm so glad.
Wow.
Even like making a firm like we were talking about, that felt very different because it's like, this is completely like not religious. This is me creating my own doctrine in a way. But then after I made it, it is just speaking life. Yeah. I think all the things we do are still based in, these people have known how spirit works for like forever.
Decades, man. Centuries.
Millennia. You know what I'm saying? People have known, but then it just got put in a box. Yeah. And I'm just happy that it's being taken out of the box again. Yeah. And we can like create our own Bible, so to speak.
1,000%, man. I'm with you on that because to your point, this has been done for thousands and thousands of years. And without going too deep, I think that's why it's important for people who follow any religion, whether it's Christianity, this, that, to go back and figure out the roots and inception. Because a lot of, even through my journey, was realizing that a lot of my power has been suppressed because of the way that Christianity was packaged when it got here to the States. Yeah. Right? And so even understanding that, like, there is so much power. And like you said, the boldness that comes with living through the divine and really realizing it. But I believe it's our job to really, and I say our meaning individuals, right? It's our job to figure out, like, what do we actually like believe, right? What actually resonates? And to your point, it's like, there's so many these false ideologies. We be scared. Black church, like, we grow up nervous to do anything. Yep. It's so like rooted in humans using religion to instill fear instead of us really realizing, y'all know that's not in the Bible, right? Black people will be like, yo, I'm gonna go to hell for da-da-da-da. You're like, you know that's not actually a scripture, right?
What verse was that? I didn't see that one.
Listen, you feel me? So I believe that's, again, though, when we peel back the layers from that and even everything else, we can realize our divine power. Because those who get it, man, once you make that shift, it's next level.
Yeah.
Next level.
So every day when you wake up, like, what is the thing that's on your mind?
Man.
If there was like you say our minds are computers.
Yeah.
Like, what's your operating system right now?
I love that question, by the way.
Thank you.
So what is my operating system right now? Honestly, it changes. Okay. I'm on iOS 39.6 right now.
You get updates every night.
When I tell you the downloads come in waves, man, I am constantly having downloads, divine downloads. I'm also constantly being inspired by the world around me, and it hasn't always been that way. It's because I've designed my life to be that way, to be full of inspiration, to be full of joy, to be full of environments in which I can catch the next download, right? Okay. I really want us to go into that too when we circle back, because some things can't be taught, they can only be caught. Some things cannot be taught, they can only be caught.
Put it on a t-shirt.
Come on. and I say that because some of us are wanting to get the next download or the next feeling of inspiration or that feeling of being unstuck. Some of us are stuck, whether it be motivation or just what to do next. And it's because we're trying to find it in a course. Right. It's because we're trying to find it in just some random book. But realizing that it's atmospheres like this, even through the screen, where you can catch the energy. And that's because of the person's intention. And that's because you've already set the intention for this. So when we underestimate the value of atmosphere and instead we prioritize, just content and information, we miss the power. So back to what I was saying, to answer your question in regards to what is my download or what is my every day when I get up, man, it's probably three parts. One is completing the things that God has put on my heart to do. Okay. So it's part completion, like what's next to complete the thing, right? Right. Because I believe that's how we die empty. So it's completing. It's also what am I supposed to do today to inspire? So it's how am I supposed to be a vessel today? So it's head on a swivel for what's the inspiration today that I'm supposed to pour into others? Okay. Because I believe that's my gift.
So you talk about legacy. Legacy has so many different meanings. We are 30-somethings. This is around the time where people start thinking about family and kids and all that good stuff. Yeah. What do you feel about that? Because the way the world's looking, a lot of people are having, different thoughts about how they want their legacy to look. Yeah. How do you feel about that?
So I think legacy is becoming something that is subjective. Some people think legacy is just having money to leave. Some people think legacy is having actual, seed or children to leave, to continue the family namesake or the operation, whatever the case may be. Right. My personal opinion, on what legacy looks like for me, it's a combination of both. It's interesting because I got a chance to live out that legacy, and I was extremely inspired by it. And what happened is that my grandfather, when he passed, he left me $5,000. And okay. $5,000 at his time, he grew up in 1920s, 1930s. So $5,000 for a black man was a lot of money in that time. And, me being a millennial, when he passed, I was probably early 20s. And I was really inspired by that because nobody had ever left me anything. I didn't know what that felt like. I knew what it was in theory. I never experienced it. And to experience that was life-changing because I used that $5,000 to buy my first DJ set. And it changed everything for me because I got a call I would say about 3 months later, I got a call from DJ Omega. DJ Omega at the time was Wale's DJ. Okay. And we had met in Richmond, actually, because I was DJing a party in Richmond. And I had just upgraded my set. So this is an actual official set because my grandfather just passed. I got $5,000 now to upgrade my set from this big 6-foot coffin case that I'm dragging around, right, to actual Technique turntables. DJ Omega calls me. We meet, maybe 3 months earlier, and he was like, "Yo, I'm in DC. My equipment didn't get on the plane. I need a set at the studio with me and Wale, and you're the only person in the area I feel like I even have number that was reliable enough to do it." And because I had the equipment he needed, I met Wale that day, and 6 months later, I'll become one of his tour DJs.
Wow.
And so I say all that to say that put me in a position to create my own income. That put me in a position to change forever my network and my community. There's people now in my phone that like are just that people, right? And it was because of what my grandfather did. Right.
So that was true legacy.
That was legacy to the highest power for me, because it was a combination of, one, him leaving something to me, right? But then also, two, me being inspired by that action inspires me to do the action, right? So sometimes legacy can be hard for people that are young to really wrap our minds around. We hear Jay-Z say it and all of that.
Right.
But until you actually experience what the feeling of legacy is, I think it can be hard and short-sighted. So I don't fault people. When people like, I just want to like create generational wealth, but I want to have kids. But I think when you experience being the kid, receiving like on the other end, gosh, it's different. So I think some people just have to, have power their own journey. But yeah, legacy I think it's subjective.
Right.
That's my thing. I definitely want children.
Okay.
I definitely want to make sure that they are set up and have wealth.
Right.
That's my version of legacy, absolutely.
Okay.
But I think more than anything, for me, what I want to leave my children is wisdom. So I don't want them to have to go out to learn something without, especially if we've already been through it. I want them to be able to learn that. And so I've been keeping notebooks, all of my notebooks I've ever written in, not just journals of personal stuff. I mean, like, I have a book that says thinking time. Literally, I kid y'all not, it says thinking time. And every week I sit down and I think for 30 minutes and write down all of the thoughts and wisdom that come to my brain. So
There's
the
some
idea,
gold in that book.
Look, we don't hope so. It's got me this far. But I say that to say that is the book that I would leave to. And it's at this point, I'm on like notebook 3.
Damn.
So it's that where we say, hey, this is the wisdom. And I ask myself a question, and I just think through the thoughts of what it is. I got that actually from Keith Cunningham. You know Rich Dad, Poor Dad? You know the book? Keith Cunningham is the rich dad. That's his real name.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he did a workshop, and he talks about the power of thinking time. So
I hope he gets royalties from that, because
probably not.
That man,
Probably not.
That's his legacy to the world.
That is his legacy, yeah. But he's a billionaire. He's fine.
Oh, he was already rich. That's true.
He's rich dad. He's the rich dad.
Money is a thing that's it's such an interesting topic, because we had two kind of different upbringings.
Okay.
So I wasn't like poor, but definitely didn't have like a lot of extra. So I find that now it's interesting how you said you don't want your kids to have to figure out stuff that you already figured out. And that's key, because a lot of people that haven't figured out stuff yet, we spend years just trying to like understand concepts like, how does money work? Why am I always broke? You know what I mean? Like, personally, what do I need to develop within me to change how my life looks with money? So that's big for the Black community in general, and I guess just any community. Is like passing that shit down.
That's what's legacy to you? Is that legacy to you? Is having that knowledge to pass down? What does it look like for you?
For me, I may have kids, I may not. So I think the most rewarding legacy I've seen is like the wisdom and the information. Because it's like you can see the impact in real time. When you tell somebody something or speak life into somebody and you see their life change afterwards, it's the most beautiful feeling I've ever had. Whether they're kids, whether they're adults, just to see somebody take it and do something with it, I feel like those are like seeds that I've just spread around the world. And it feels amazing. I'm sure you have that same feeling.
No, I resonate, man. It reminds me of a quote. I can't remember exactly how it says, but it's phrased in the essence of, if you want to be immortal, change someone's life. Because they'll say your name forever. Right? That concept of like money fades, money goes. You know, but and even children may decide not to have more children, so the legacy in that way could end. But if you want to be immortal and truly have legacy, change someone's life, because that spring of changing their life will then change the next person's life. And so I resonate with that deep, man.
Jesus ain't had no kids.
Come on, he did it.
We still talking about this man.
He didn't, but he did, right?
So yeah, it's just wild how many different ways you can have legacy.
Not for you.
I
love that perspective.
Yeah. Anything else on your heart that you wanted to share with the people?
I mean, we've covered a lot. I think I'll say this, part of what I really, really hope people get today is really to know that what we're doing is available to them.
Okay.
Is that power is not a respective person. It is available to all. And when that perspective shift happens and people realize that you are not below or above anybody. We're all right here, right? Yeah. There's just because someone may have certain accolades or this or that, nobody's below and nobody's above. And having that perspective allows and opens up the door to say, okay, if I am on the same plane as this person, what do I now need to do in order to, as I say, come on up a little higher? What do I need to do then to come up higher to the frequency in which I'm operating in my gift? Right? So it's like the same analogy we talked about earlier. If there's a wave on a radio and frequency stations, and you know, why, if we're all on the same radio, AM, FM, what is it called, frequency channel? If we're all on that same channel, how come some stations come in clearer and some are a little bit lower, right? And that's the idea here, is that if you find yourself where you're like, you know, I'm not really walking in my calling, and I'm being a little bit more timid, or I know there's more that I need to be do, just remember that you're also on the FM station. It's just time for you to come on up a little higher, turn that volume up a little higher, so that you can start coming through to hear, you know, and say what you got to say too. So that's the only thing. I mean, we covered a lot, but I just want people to be inspired to know that, like, be you, step out, be bold, as you said earlier. Like, it is available to you. And on the other side of it is everything else you want anyway.
Everything. And it just starts with a decision. That's the thing, is like, I used to be that person that was very unsure, very just like, I had a very negative view of myself and an inferiority complex. I'm not even sure where it came from. Looking back, like, it doesn't make sense. Why would I feel that way? But I did. And I remember being at my call center job in 2015 that I hated. Just feeling very just like out of it. And that was the moment I made a decision, like, I don't know what I'm going to do, but something got to change. You know
it ain't going to be this.
I'm not doing this another day.
Yeah.
And I had a little notebook. I had to write some personal notes to myself in that notebook. But yeah, it started with the decision that I would view myself differently. I would view myself as the man I want to be. And when you first make that decision, you don't know how it's going to happen. It feels very fake. You feel like you're lying to yourself.
Right?
But
that's that neuroscience kicking in.
Yeah. It's so much cognitive dissonance. It's like, wait, you don't really believe that. Why are you saying it? But just sticking to it and just deciding, like, nah, I'm going to just keep saying this shit and see what happens. It's like life puts you on the path to then teach you how to be that. And then you have the test that you have to pass. And it's like through that journey, you become that person. So it's just wild looking back from 2023 now to 2015. I am a completely different person. Yeah. And anybody can do that. You just have to be ready to go through that process and take the time and just do it.
1,000%, man.
Yeah.
I feel you. Like, we all can get in situations where we like, this is no longer what I want to do. Where I want to be. Even relationship, like you said earlier. Like, it's just a decision to decide I've decided to or not to. And the rest will happen. How do you find strategy, or what is your strategy to walk out and stay committed to whatever you decide? If you've decided, I'm not doing this relationship anymore, or I am doing this relationship, or I am doing this business or idea, or whatever the case may be, and even take it firm, like once you decided to do it, what's your process and or strategy that keeps you committed to doing it? How do you, even when you don't feel like it?
That's a great question. I'm actually just now kind of understanding that more deeply, like how to stay in it.
Okay.
But for me, I need things to be real simple. I don't like a bunch of steps. So for me, it's like, the simplest way I could do it is like, I have to follow what feels like love. Even when it's hard, because I know that that's what I'm supposed to be doing because it feels like love. But when I'm not doing something out of fear of being uncomfortable, fear of anything, it's like, that's not a valid reason. So like, now I have to stay on track because loving myself means doing the things that are best for me. And that's my thought process. Every time I don't feel like doing something, I'm like, shit, but I got to do it because this is love. Like, I have to.
Yeah, I love that. It's so you kind of see it. What I'm hearing is like the invert of fear is love. So you got to follow it if it's love, because the invert is not an option.
Yeah, like if you follow fear, you just get more, you go further in that direction. So like we talk about the relationships, like a lot of relationships and jobs and things I've committed to, I was doing out of fear of either not being accepted by the person or the organization, fear of hurting someone's feelings. But it's like, to me, when I look at life in like the wide perspective, anything you do in that frequency, in that vibration, you're causing more of it. So I'm causing more fear, I'm causing more negativity. Yeah. I don't want to have that impact on the world. So I figure if I do everything in love, even if it's uncomfortable initially, it's going to make more love.
That's a word, man. That's a word. Even when you talk about the vibrational piece that comes with it, that is one of the most underestimated things, is the power of those vibrations.
Yeah.
And man, that's powerful. We need that. We need more. People say we need more love. Actually, we need more people that are decided. We need more people that are decided to do things in love. And the love will happen by default. Right? But I love how you said that. No point intended. Right? But I love that because it puts it in a practical perspective of like, okay, I don't want to do something, I do want to do something. This becomes the value instead of it being so arbitrary, like we need to love each other, but like how do we do that? And you just gave like a very simple blueprint to how we can operate in more love individually and then collectively by just doing things that vibrate love. That's solid.
That's the only way I can do it. My mind doesn't like multi-step shit.
Yeah. Meanwhile, I'm over here with 30-page blueprint plans to take over the world, like Pinky.
I admire people who can do that. It's like for me, once I get past like 3 steps, I'm like, nah, I'm not doing that.
This is refreshing, though. This is refreshing to sit with you because a lot of my life is like this. It's very structured, very logical, but very computed. And so to be in a space where we can share energy in terms of intention, but then also see from various perspectives, it's powerful, it's refreshing. There's a book I definitely love. I love sharing books called The Accidental Creative by Todd Henry. One of my favorites. If you do anything creative, buy everything Todd Henry has. Okay. But he talks about, very similar to that concept of Who's Holding Your Ladder. He talks about the idea of having these like round tables and head-to-heads and like essentially masterminds, but without such of the intent of solving things and more with the intent to like gather energy. Yeah. You know what I mean? So this is a whole like thing right here because I really appreciate the balance of our energy, but also the representation of it as well too.
For sure. Appreciate you, Tina.
I appreciate you, Will, man. This has been phenomenal.
Yeah, for sure. Great. Another episode of Just Stream. I'm figuring this thing out. It's the 3rd episode. I am learning as I go, but I'm happy that y'all are watching. Tune in next time. Last thing I want to say, do everything in love, do it with passion, Do it as if you know your time here is limited, but don't do it out of the fear of your limited time. Do it out of the love of the time you have. So, that's all I got.
That's it, man.
Peace.
Cool.
Hey, that's good.
It's a wrap. Yes, sir.